and I forever and ever, no matter where you are, you're my guiding star.
And from the very first moment I saw you, I never felt such emotion. I'm walking on air just to know you are there.
Hold me in your arms, don't let me go. I want to stay forever, closer each day, home and away. You know we belong together.
And our next visit to Summer Bay will be at 12:25 tomorrow lunchtime, with its usual repeat at 5:10. Well, in the more immediate future, this evening we'll be turning the pages of the region's moving picture album with its poignant reminder of the way things used to be here in the Northeast on the Tyne programme that allows us to wallow unashamedly in nostalgia. That's Flashback. You can see it at 6:30. But stay with Tyne now for the news at 5:40 with Fiona Armstrong. We join her after this.
How do you get ultra white without boil washing? New Daz Ultra, the most powerful Daz ever.
Luke here, we call Pukey Lukey. After his dinner, his bibs look like a battlefield. But I get them lovely and white.
Did you boil wash them?
Nope. I use New Daz Ultra.
New Daz Ultra's high-energy booster means a strip stained in tea gets only this white without the booster, but ultra white with Daz Ultra.
The kids' towels get dragged all over the swimming pool. They come back filthy and stinking. But look how white I got them.
You must have boil washed.
No. New Daz Ultra.
For a white you could almost mistake for boil wash white. New Daz Ultra, at a price that's right.
Watch out, it's Mitsubishi time at Rumbelows. So many TVs and videos, some on interest-free credit. I can't possibly watch them all, so I won't. Or maybe I will.
Six of the best for the government over the state of Durham schools. Good evening. Northern Life reports on the county's crumbling schools at 6 o'clock. Also tonight, the major fire that left Scarborough and the surrounding areas without a single working telephone.
We've action from Tyneside featherweight champ John Davison's bout, and we've a report on the toy store that's having to close early because of shoplifters.
And that's all coming up on Northern Life after the news from ITN, and we also have a wartime reunion here in the studio. We'll see you for Northern Life at 6.
A Heseltine challenge and the leadership battle is on. No comment from Mrs Thatcher, but supporters say she'll win. IRA suspect in court after extradition from Ireland. And remembering the Blitz, the Queen Mother returns to Coventry. Good evening. The battle for the leadership of the Conservative Party has begun in earnest. Mr Heseltine has declared his intention to challenge Mrs Thatcher and says if he becomes Prime Minister, he'll immediately review the poll tax. Mrs Thatcher's supporters say she'll win a decisive victory. Nominations for the leadership close tomorrow, and voting for the first round will take place next Tuesday. If the contest goes to a second round, when other candidates can come forward, voting would be on Tuesday, November the 27th.
The media camped on Michael Heseltine's doorstep didn't have long to wait this morning. Heseltine's chief aide brought the message that support was rising and that he could beat Mrs Thatcher. And Mr Heseltine was able to launch a simple appeal to Conservatives. He says he's the one who can win the election and save their seats.
I am persuaded that I would have a better chance now, a better prospect now, than Mrs Thatcher of leading the Conservatives into a fourth electoral victory and thus avoiding the ultimate calamity of a Labour government. I have accordingly informed the Chief Whip and the Chairman of the 1922 Committee that I have agreed to allow my name to go forward in the leadership contest.
The first promise of the would-be Prime Minister, a fundamental review of the poll tax. The accusation of those who oppose Mr Heseltine is that he can't win, but he can inflict damage on the party.
So it's happened, and he's been pushed into doing something he's been swearing he wouldn't do for many months. I think it's a great pity and a great mistake, and I don't think it'll do him in the long term, I'm afraid, any good.
I think that the only question which one can ask is whether the majority is going to be a large majority secured on the first ballot, or whether my colleagues want this thing to drag on for 2 or 3 weeks.
But back at Westminster are those who say the contest has to take place, whatever the damage.
It is the divisions that have created and made necessary the contest, and it's not the contest that have created the divisions, it's the other way around. I think everyone knows that, and now it has to be fought out, and Michael Heseltine has shown courage in realising that and coming forward.
I think what the opinion polls are going to show over the next few days while the contest is on is that he is the man who can lead the party to victory.
Mr Heseltine optimistically says everyone can stay friends.
I don't think there will be any permanent difficulties for the Conservative Party, providing, and this is a very important proviso, the dialogue is conducted as friends and colleagues in a party determined above all things that we must not have a Labour Party in government after the next election.
Mrs Thatcher left Downing Street by the back door earlier today, heading for Regent Street for lunch and a fashion display. There was no public comment then or later, but the message from her camp is she'll fight if necessary not just the first ballot, but if she doesn't win outright, the second ballot too. The opposition parties, not unnaturally, would like an election.
Who leads the Tories is a matter for members of the Conservative Party, but who leads Britain is a matter for all the people in Britain. And that's why we believe a general election should be held now, to let the people decide.
We tragically have a government that is divided, confused and internally squabbling. What we need is not a leadership election. What we need is a general election.
But tonight in the Commons there's been strong support for Mrs Thatcher from the Chancellor, and outside from Douglas Hurd, perhaps the key figure in the contest. He's favoured by many as a compromise candidate. If there were a second ballot, would he withdraw his support for Mrs Thatcher and stand himself?
No, I don't think I could possibly do that. I put my name to, as the proposer, with John Major as the seconder, of the Prime Minister for re-election. That must stand. I wish it to stand.
But do you think she could go to a second round? Just imagine the circumstances.
Oh, yes. Of course she could. Of course she could. Whether she will is up to her. But, you know, I think it's a mistake now to stray too far down those paths, tempting though they are for you. I mean, I would like to bring this episode to an end. I think it's damaging to the government and actually damaging to the country.
The Thatcher camp says the fact that Douglas Hurd is standing beside her means that MPs have a straight choice, Heseltine or Thatcher, and they say they're going to win on the first ballot. But there are senior Conservatives who fear that the number of MPs who will not only abstain but vote for Mr Heseltine will be large enough to destroy the credibility not just of the party but of its present leader. Peter Allen, ITN, Westminster.
Mr Heseltine's qualities as a potential Prime Minister will now come under close scrutiny. His flamboyant style has been criticised by some commentators.
Michael Heseltine's political character is a marriage of the action man image he projected as a hardline defence secretary and the politician with a social conscience who toured the inner cities after the riots in Liverpool, urging greater government financial support. In 1976, he got a reputation as a firebrand when he waved the mace in the House of Commons at the Labour benches. A forceful member of the cabinet, his relationship with the Prime Minister has been characterised by a mutual distrust. It turned to open conflict during the Westland helicopter affair, where he advocated a European solution. His resignation in '86 was primarily a protest at what he said was a lack of cabinet consultation by the Prime Minister. But since his departure, he's been preparing for his chance at the leadership, working tirelessly to cultivate grassroots supports around the constituencies and developing a distinct political philosophy, which he's tagged caring capitalism. Probably Britain's wealthiest politician, he lost a fortune in his early business career and came back to build a publishing empire. Now he set himself the task of being the first politician since Winston Churchill to return from the backbenches to lead his party.
In Mr Heseltine's constituency tonight, one local paper can finally plan its front page. Journalists here have shared a mood of anticipation.
For the local MP to have a possible chance of becoming Prime Minister is obviously very exciting.
As the day passed and news of the leadership battle spread through the town, support for Mr Heseltine's decision was by no means universal.
I think Mrs Thatcher's made some recent mistakes, but
I don't think Mr Heseltine would be in a better position or would be a better Prime Minister.
I think the general opinion amongst ordinary people is that she's had her day and it's over.
She's had it. This poll tax has killed me, for one.
Local party officials are still evenly split on their MP's challenge.
If he can't carry his whole association with him in support of his bid, could he carry the party with him? And more importantly, could he carry the country with him?
Henley's Tory voters must now wait to discover whether the leadership challenge has further damaged their party's chances of pulling together again. Robert Hall, ITN, Henley.
Mrs Thatcher's supporters say with British troops facing a war in the Gulf, it's the wrong time for a leadership contest. Defence Secretary Tom King, who's visiting the Desert Rats in Saudi Arabia, has said that a second armoured brigade of 5,000 men is likely to join the Gulf forces soon.
Even in the Saudi desert, there was no escape from the contest for the Tory party leadership. Defence Secretary Tom King, on manoeuvres with the Desert Rats, rode a Challenger tank to the defence of the Prime Minister. Camouflaged netting to hide the venue of his desert press conference, but little attempt to disguise his support for Mrs Thatcher, as Mr King told reporters a challenge to her leadership right now could only benefit Saddam Hussein.
We're moving, the next few weeks are critical weeks. There must be no doubting our resolution in ensuring that Saddam Hussein doesn't believe that somehow we're going to be preoccupied with other things and not absolutely committed to seeing the ending of this aggression.
Mr King says he wants British troops to know they have the support of all sides of the Tory party. The Secretary of State for Defence returns to London tomorrow, where for once his concern over conflict in the desert is likely to be overshadowed by his involvement in the power battle at Westminster. Paul Davis, ITN, Saudi Arabia.
An IRA suspect and hunger striker has appeared before London's Bow Street magistrates in a wheelchair after being extradited to Britain. Desmond Ellis was flown from the Republic after the Irish Supreme Court rejected his appeal against the extradition. He was remanded in custody for 8 days on explosives charges. After the hearing, he was driven off in a police van. Ellis has vowed to starve himself to death.
Anti-extradition demonstrators caused uproar outside the Supreme Court as the appeal was turned down. The hearing went ahead with a man accused of involvement in an IRA British bombing campaign dating back 9 years, absent from court. Ellis was in a military hospital, starting the 36th day of his hunger strike in a weak condition. The 5 judges ruled against his case, which included claims that he couldn't receive a fair trial in Britain. This was the first time Irish courts have used the 1987 Extradition Act, under which claims that Ellis was wanted for political offences were dismissed. Today's successful judgment under the new legislation will undoubtedly please governments on both sides of the Irish Sea. Extradition has been made easier, but the British courts now face a dilemma. Ellis is a sick man who appears determined to die rather than face justice in Britain.
My brother is continuing his hunger strike because there's no way he wants to live now, be sent to Britain. He was willing to be tried in his own country here.
Ellis was immediately flown by a helicopter from hospital to a military airfield near Dublin. The formal handover to the Metropolitan Police took place behind security cordons. Then an RAF jet, with police and a medical team on board, took off with the first IRA suspect ever to be extradited from the Irish Republic to mainland Britain. Andrew Simmons, ITN, Dublin.
Some news in brief. 3 detectives involved in the Guildford and Woolwich pub bombing inquiries are being charged with conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. The Guildford 4 were released last October after serving 15 years in prison. And broadcasters and journalists have been paying tribute to Malcolm Muggeridge, who's died at the age of 87. One of the best-known television personalities of the 50s and 60s, he made his name as an outspoken critic of modern Britain. The government will have to defend its social security rules before the European Court of Justice after losing the latest round of a legal battle with a working mother. The High Court agreed to refer her case after Patricia Cresswell said she was better off claiming benefit than having a job.
Patricia Cresswell took her case to court because she found that once she'd paid out for a childminder to care for her 2 boys while she worked, she was better off staying at home and living on state benefits. Mrs. Cresswell works part-time as a graphic designer. By doing so, she's £5 a week worse off than she would be not working. Her case was supported by the Child Poverty Action Group, who said they were delighted by the judge's decision.
This is a very important case. It will give hope to many thousands of single parents who want to work part-time but who are prevented from doing so by this absurd rule. Because if they do work part-time, they're forced to live on an income below the income support level, or else they have the choice of not working at all when they wish to do so.
The financial position of people like Mrs. Creswell came about as a direct result of benefit changes introduced 2 years ago. Before that, childminding fees were taken into account.
The government had argued that means-tested benefits fell outside the scope of European law. Clearly, the judges felt differently. Joan Fairkettle, ITN, at the High Court.
Football, and England drew with the Republic of Ireland in this afternoon's European Championship qualifier in Dublin. Platt scored for England, but Cascarino equalised 12 minutes later. Ireland stay top of the group on goal difference. In Sofia, the latest score is Bulgaria 1, Scotland 1, with just a couple of minutes to play. Tonight, Northern Ireland play Austria in Vienna, while Wales take on Luxembourg. And the main points of the news again. The battle for the leadership of the Conservative Party has begun in earnest. Mr. Heseltine has declared his intention to challenge Mrs. Thatcher and says if he becomes Prime Minister, he'll immediately review the poll tax. Mrs. Thatcher's supporters say she'll win a decisive victory. And the IRA suspect, Desmond Ellis, has appeared before magistrates in London after being extradited to Britain. And finally, the Queen Mother was in Coventry today to mark the blackest weeks of the city's history when German bombers reduced most of it to rubble. 50 years ago, she toured the virtual ruins of the city. Today's visit commemorated the anniversary of Coventry's Blitz.
50 years ago tonight, the Luftwaffe reduced the industrial city of Coventry to rubble, dropping 500 tons of high explosive, which killed nearly 570 civilians. The remains of the city's medieval cathedral still stand as a reminder. Today, thousands of people, many of them veterans of the Blitz, turned out to greet the Queen Mother as she made an historic return to Coventry, which she toured just days after the air raid. Then by her side was King George VI. Today it was the German President Richard von Weizsäcker. Together they stood in a gesture of unity and friendship to unveil a plaque at the cathedral to commemorate the Coventry Blitz. An international service of remembrance and reconciliation followed. Tonight, the all clear will sound again around the city as the people remember. Terry Lloyd, ITN, Coventry.
Channel 4 News is next from ITN at 7, including a live interview with Michael Heseltine. But from the news at 5:40, good evening.
Good evening. Well, things are moving on apace now on the weather front right across the UK, and for the next few days we're likely to see little areas of low pressure and bands of cloud and rain rushing eastwards across the country. We have one such low pressure tonight just crossing northern parts of Scotland, and it's going to give quite a windy spell of weather down this western side. Likely to see gales perhaps near the coast as far south as about North Wales, and in fact the winds may even touch severe gale force on the more exposed parts of western Scotland. Now, as you would imagine with a low like that, a fair number of showery outbreaks of rain being driven along by those strong winds from the northwest. But gradually through the night, as the low drifts away down towards the Low Countries, you'll find that the strongest winds get out into the North Sea, and it takes a lot of the rain and showers with it. But I think it'll be rather slow to clear southeast Scotland, northeast England. And then later in the night after a clear slot, more cloud and more outbreaks of rain heading in towards Ireland. And that's the tale for tomorrow, that cloud and rain in the west moving steadily eastwards through the morning across Scotland, into northern and western parts of England and Wales, and in Scotland and Northern Ireland in particular, some of that rain quite heavy. Then as we go through the afternoon, the same process continuing, the rain pushing across the rest of England, but becoming patchy as it does so down in the southeast, some mist and fog trailing along into the southwestern corner. But at the same time, the rain tending to peter out for a while over Northern Ireland and southern Scotland, perhaps central northern Scotland, getting a little bit brighter just for a short time through the afternoon. Now, temperatures tomorrow, well, not too different from what we've seen today, about 12 to 14 for most of us. That's 54 up to 57 degrees Fahrenheit. The odd spot perhaps a few degrees higher. But getting windy as the day goes on, winds up to gale force once again in western parts of Scotland late on in the day. Well, that's it from me. Join Shan after news at 10. Here's the summary.
In the northeast, mainly cloudy this evening with a few showers. Fresh and blustery southwesterly winds increasing to gale force as the night wears on. Temperatures 7 or 8 Celsius, the mid-40s Fahrenheit. Tomorrow a bright, perhaps sunny start, but clouds thickening, bringing rain to the Pennines by early afternoon and across the region by dusk. About 13 Celsius, 55 Fahrenheit.
Everyone knows concentrated powders mean less chemicals, less packaging and less waste. But do they mean less cleaning power too? Not at all. New Radion Micro. A concentrated powder with unbeatable performance. With around half the powder, Radion Micro gets your clothes really clean because it removes tough stains and odours, even the microscopic traces of stale odour that other concentrated powders miss. The result?
Looks clean, smells clean, and a lot less powder too.
New Radion Micro, unbeatable at removing dirt and odours.
To keep going as long as Duracell, how many times would you expect to replace ordinary SP batteries? Twice? 3 times. In this continuous test, Duracell outlasts ordinary SP batteries by up to 6 times. So why settle for anything less? Duracell. No ordinary battery looks like it or lasts like it.
If you register for a prospectus in the 12 regional electricity companies' share offers, you could qualify for money off your bill.
You haven't done that yet, have you, Frank? I swear you'd forget your head if it wasn't screwed on.
Closing date to register for incentives is Wednesday, November the 14th.
Some of the great seats of learning in Britain. From today, there's a new one. This is the seat, and this is the new learning curve from Acorn, including the latest version of the BBC computer used in 85% of schools, so you can master word processing, get help with the national curriculum, have fun, or get down to business. In fact, it's everything you need to get on with computers. Call free phone Acorn Computers now.
Do you find tumble drying can sometimes leave your clothes all stuck together? Because they're full of static. Now Bounce protects your clothes, because Bounce is a sheet designed to work with the heat of your tumble dryer, so your washing comes out billowing freely, clear of clinging static. With Bounce, you don't get stuck with static.
The plight of County Durham's crumbling schools, the government gets a caning. Number unobtainable, Scarborough's phone links cut by a major fire. Closing early for Christmas, the store that's been overwhelmed by shoplifters. And ready for the world title, Tyneside's featherweight champ, John Davison.
Good evening. Also tonight, we report on the latest